So today's conversation on the surface seems obvious, right? What is a luxury watch? But it's far more complicated than I think most people think. Most people are looking at brand and price tag, kind of the shine, the outer coat. But I can tell you with certainty that there are $10,000 watches that, in the opinion of many, including myself, are not luxurious. And then there are, $1,000 and $2,000 and $3,000 watches that have incredibly luxurious elements. So it's a matter of educating yourself and really taking a close look under a loop, if you will, and understanding what it is you're looking at. What is up, Watch Fam? I am Christian from Theo & Harris, and today I'm at London Jewelers Manhasset Watch Salon. I picked out 4 pieces that I know from reading all the comments that you guys really do love, but I didn't just pick out 4 watches to talk about them. I want to bring out a big conversation, particularly around the word luxury. What is a luxury watch? The word gets thrown around a lot, and I think that I've boiled it down to basically 4 key elements that are all exemplified throughout this tray here, and then really one big red herring, one distraction that has been propped up to distract you, the buyer, from really being discerning and really figuring out what is luxury. Am I really buying a luxury watch? I think this could be a great conversation, so let's get into it. The first topic I want to start off with is really one of my favorite topics, and that's finishing. Finishing is not limited to one particular element of a watch. There's dial finishing, there's hand finishing, there's case finishing, there's bracelet finishing, and then of course movement finishing. Now some brands have become synonymous with finishing. Think about Audemars Piguet and their Royal Oak. The Royal Oak was the first luxury steel sports watch because of the extraordinary lengths that the brand went to execute this incredibly well finished watch. The hand brushing and polishing and beveling throughout, this incredible contrast. And some other brands that really exemplify that spirit are Grand Seiko and Piaget, which we have right here. Grand Seiko has become super famous for their Zaratsu polishing. Now they're the only major player in the watch business that does this sort of polishing technique. It's remarkable if you really look at it. It's a perfect mirror polish. In the words of Joe Kirk, who's a Grand Seiko representative, there's no distortion with Zaratsu. You can actually read text off of the polished Zaratsu case. You see the same level of finishing in their hands and their indices. Now moving on to Piaget, we have here the Polo S. And there are 2 great examples, I think, of finishing here in this watch. One is the case, specifically the bezel. You have a beautifully finished bezel, brushed at the top with these polished edges that you slip off of. It's that delicacy that really brings you in. But then if you flip the watch over and admire the movement, which is their caliber 111-0P, this is an in-house caliber, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a second, but the finishing really here is just superb. From the oscillating weight throughout the movement, this is a really meticulous job. And this watch at $11,100, while of course is a lot of money, really is probably, for its class, finished above its pay grade. If you compare this to other watches at this price point, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find where Piaget missed, because they really didn't. Now, while we're taking a look at movements, finishing isn't the only variable to look for. It's also ingenuity. It's technical innovation, which I think is exemplified both in this Piaget, being an in-house, rather thin caliber, but also here, down market a little bit at $6,100, and Nomos' Zurich World Time. Now the movement also is finished well, not as decadent as the Piaget, but very well done, but the complication is awesome. This is called a World Time. Technically, it's a GMT with 24 zones, and you're not going to find another watch at this price point that really competes directly with this watch. It's the Nomos in-house caliber 5201. I think that this watch is one of the best watches under 10,000 bucks from any brand. It's 39 millimeters. It does wear a little bit larger, but if you can carry this piece, it's in many ways a no-brainer. An elegant, sporty travel watch, but back to the point, it's the movement ingenuity. right? Nomos went above and beyond to really develop something, which, by the way, costs a ton of money. Here's an example. In this watch, you have Nomos's in-house swing system, which is their escapement technology. The development of that technology not only took 7 years and 12 million euros. That's a dedication from a small, independent brand to produce a piece of technology that is truly new and independent. When you look at movements, it's not as easy to admire them from a technical perspective as it is from a finishing perspective. We can just look at a beautiful, well-finished oscillating weight and say, wow. But if you're looking from a technical lens, you really have to read more and take a more educated approach. And when you do, there are brands like Nomos here and like Piaget with this very thin caliber that impress you. Another watch that is luxurious for a couple of reasons is this. This is IWC's Portugueser. This is an automatic 7-day power reserve watch in 18 karat rose gold. Now, there are a couple things about this watch that are very lovable, but I think that the two, standout, assets it has making it undisputably a luxury watch are, one, the complication. Creating a 7-day power reserve watch is absolutely no easy feat. It's powered by the caliber 52010, and this series of movement, which I believe was introduced around 2015 and has been improved upon since, has been introduced by the brand from the ground up, developed from the ground up. Like we were talking about with the Nomos swing system, this is an example of a brand really producing something new, not just repackaging, reimagining and redeveloping. This watch, again, 7-day power reserve, which is extremely impressive. The movement itself is absolutely beautiful too, and the biggest and most useful technological advancement here is the fact that this series of caliber stores power in 2 separate barrels, which is exactly what allows this watch to have such a large reserve. Moving on from the movement and the technological development, you've got a big 18 karat rose gold case. I would be remiss if I did not mention, of course, that the usage of precious materials, metals in this example, play a major role. I don't think that the metal alone can make a watch luxurious. I happen to think you need a really nice balance of all of these elements, but of course you do have to acknowledge the value that a precious metal does bring. And these precious materials, these odd materials, aren't always gold and platinum and all these things. You can also go into carbon, and you can go into ceramic, and you can go into sapphire. Alternative materials in general are an entire class, are an entire variable that you take into consideration when evaluating whether or not a watch is luxurious. Now, the biggest variable, which to me is it's a shame because it's a bit of a perversion that I see people looking at and looking for, is really brand history. Now, I love brand history. I love history in general, but I love watch history. I love flipping through the pages of these old books, and I love reading about the developments that were made by the forefathers and the founders of brand. I adore that stuff. But that's a really easy way, relatively speaking, for a brand to sell you a mediocre product, right? Feigning importance or riding the coattails of past achievements does not qualify your watch today as luxury, right? It's the material item itself. Of course, its historical relevance and its connection to history will endear that watch to your heart so much more. There's no doubt there. But a mediocre watch is a mediocre watch, no matter how closely tied it may be to, achievements of the past. So that's the big red herring. Don't allow brands, specifically in watches, but really in anything, kind of put you through a daze and trick you into not being critical on their product, right? You want to really look at this stuff. And if you are critical, and if you can really sit down and look at these items and learn about them, in my opinion, you become a far more well-rounded, watch geek. You're able to stay away sometimes from the big, topics of conversation and look at what is it that I really admire. Right? The Piaget Polo is a great example. This watch isn't nearly as famous as I think it should be, or it will be in a couple of years, because it's only been fairly recently introduced and it doesn't have 50, 60 years of legacy to be built on, right? So there are so many watches that if you really take a critical look, I think you'd be very, very surprised by. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode. I hope that you learned a little bit more about luxury watches and how to really take a critical look. And thank you to London Jewelers for allowing me to run through your watch salon. If you guys are in the general New York area, I highly suggest that you come and take a look at London Jewelers collection. They're an authorized dealer for a whole host of brands, and we're here a lot, so maybe we can say hi. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like this video if you liked it, and subscribe to our channel at Theo and Harris if you love watches.